So thank you very much, everyone, for joining today. Today we have another session as part of the DEPI webinar series, where we present short showcases of digital solutions and training resources and tools for schools to improve school operations, teaching and learning, and improve student outcomes. So I'm delighted today to welcome Stephanie Hobler, CEO of TeachUp, to present about how to create safer school environments, specifically with whole school bilingual training. So today's session will touch on practical training aligned with the TPPK mandate, the benefits of a whole school approach, so training non-faculty staff, faculty staff, and volunteers. And we'll also touch on some of the key outcomes of a 12-school pilot project that DEPI conducted in partnership with TeachUp in November and December 2024. So a little bit about DEPI. So we are Digital Education Partnerships Indonesia, and we work with organizations like TeachUp to support them in their growth and partnerships with schools in Indonesia. So we support localization, training, and implementation to ensure long-term success and impact in schools in the Indonesian education sector. We work with public and private school sectors. We partner with government-linked networks, Yayasan foundations, and also SPK international curriculum schools as well. So we're also working very closely with certain departments in the Ministry of Education. And as you can see from that image here, Stephanie and I had a meeting with the Director General of Teachers and Education Personnel to present the outcomes of the DEPI TeachUp pilot project. So I'm now going to hand over to Stephanie Hobler, CEO of TeachUp, to present about bilingual safeguarding in schools. And if you have any questions throughout today's webinar, please put it into the chat. We will have a short 10-minute Q&A session at the end. But if you have any pressing questions that you'd like answered throughout the webinar, please put them in the chat, and we'll do our best to address them as soon as possible. So without further ado, I will stop sharing my screen and I will hand over to Stephanie.
Thank you, James. At the moment, I don't know how to share my screen with you, and my video is not working. So it's a great start to the day. So let me see if I can just get this up for you quickly. There we go. And hopefully you can, everybody can see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
All good.
Okay, brilliant. Okay.
You have your camera on, Stephanie.
Pardon?
Your camera is off.
Yes, I know, it won't connect, unfortunately. It seems to have logged me in twice for some reason. So really, I want to talk today about safeguarding in general in the international context, and of course, we're based in Asia Pacific. I myself lived in Hong Kong for 15 years and have worked extensively with schools around the region. But of course, then getting into a more specific Indonesia context. But what I really want to talk about first is just really understanding safeguarding responsibilities and what is safeguarding, because I think a lot of people can often get a little bit confused. There's often confusion between child safeguarding and child protection. They are two different things, and I think they get used quite interchangeably. But safeguarding is actually your policies and procedures and practices that the school puts in place. So that's to ensure the overall well-being. Whereas your child protection is actually dealing with a specific part of safeguarding. And that's when you will typically have external agencies who will step in. So you've essentially got preventative, which is safeguarding, and responsive, which is child protection. And they are different. I think it's important to just be aware of the differences, because, as I said, they can sometimes get a little bit confused. Often we have schools who will say they're child protection officers team, but it's actually really safeguarding is what they're working with. And in terms of safeguarding, well, as I said, we have policies, procedures, and practices. So in a school, and I myself was a teacher for many years, there are risks everywhere, and those can be very, very small or minor risks up to, very, very obvious risks in terms of a child being physically harmed, elements of emotional abuse as well as neglect. And so it's really important to be mindful that any safeguarding risk is a concern, because you are not aware of how quickly they can escalate. And the most important thing is to have clear policies. So I'm sure all your schools have safeguarding policies in place, clear procedures. So what do we do should, a safeguarding risk arise? And then our practices. Okay, so what are the general practices that we do? Do we always report? Do we write our reports down? Do we use an internal system to do that? Who do we report to? Just making sure that we're really aware as a school community how we manage our child safeguarding risks. So again, procedure, our policy is our document. Yeah, so that's your organization's commitment to child safety. That should be obviously available in your school handbook, online. It should also actually be available on your school website if you do have a school website. Procedure are your specific steps you should follow when you have concerns. And then practice is your everyday behaviors. So things like following rules, reporting concerns, and maintaining professional boundaries. And I think one thing to think about is really an element that kind of goes sort of overlooked, I would say, in terms of safeguarding, is we always think about the children and what's happening to them, and actions following concerns. But also it's really important to think about professional conduct, because teachers come from very varying backgrounds of training. Depending on the country you come from, there may be different, standards in professional conduct, your teacher standards. Some people may not have very much experience in terms of how you behave professionally in a school setting. So it's really important to think about that. And I will touch on that later. But what I will discuss now is our safeguarding concerns that are specific to Indonesia. And of course, there are global safeguarding concerns that we see in most schools, but some are more prevalent in certain countries, especially if we're thinking about the international school context, which is a little bit different than your local or government schools. So we have a few stats that we've collated here, and something that James will share later is the work that we've been doing with the Ministry of Education and TPPK to sort of help support the training that we have prepared. But there is a long way to go still in terms of child protection challenges, and it's obviously not just Indonesia, it's many countries. But obviously the great thing is that Indonesia, the MOE, has put in place this new TPPK mandate and the reporting channels, I suppose, in terms of child protection. So that's a really positive change in terms of child protection in Indonesia, and obviously with schools having to mandatory report incidences. But one thing that I want to start with is cyberbullying and online safety. I'm sure for all you educators out there, it's such a great concern for this generation of students, children. It's so hard to manage as a school. Something that's very difficult to control, but also that it's how to liaise with parents. Again, something that's very, very challenging for schools is liaising with parents, and I will talk about that in terms of our next concern. But really, it's about having these policies, practices, and procedures in place. So how can we mitigate the risks of, cyberbullying, online safety? Well, first of all, school-wide ban on mobile phones. So many schools do not allow mobile phones in school at all, or it may be that they are, sort of in the locker during actual school hours, but it's there for safety and emergencies. but it's also really educating students in, how they behave online, because obviously what gets put online stays online forever. And what may seem, a joke or a jest can actually be very, very harmful and detrimental to students. And there's so much that we could cover in this, but I know that it's been an issue that has been raised by the Indonesian government in terms of a real cause for concern in terms of, not only cyberbullying, but actually online safety. And it's something that, really needs to be looked into further and figure out how, schools, parents, children manage this sort of mammoth of safeguarding concerns. So, one to really be aware of and to focus on as a school in general, about, boundaries, use of, screen time, essentially. A big concern is obviously artificial intelligence, and it's even about how to use artificial intelligence safely, when it comes to doing work. So there's a lot we could cover here. We could be here all day for online safety and cyberbullying, but something that, I think is obviously a great concern for schools, and parents and children. And then we have affluent neglect, and it's, as an educator that now obviously speaks to schools around Asia, this is what, China, Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore, for very specifically for international schools as well, affluent neglect is really a growing problem. And we always think that, children who come from very wealthy families, there's a lower risk of safeguarding concerns. And it's just simply not the case. And there are so many challenges around this, because I'm sure, as you know, that if you're in a fee-paying school, for example, there is the pressure to, manage parents and manage the situation in a different way than if you were in a local or government school. Being mindful of, these fee-paying parents, they may be very well connected or influential families. It becomes I know as a teacher, it becomes really challenging when you have a situation or situations where you feel like you can't really speak up because of the sort of comeback on you as an educator, given the situation, the circumstance. But in terms of affluent neglect, it may be that a child is left alone frequently. It could be that a parent's actually overseas working and the child is, left alone with a domestic helper, and it may be that the child is left alone on their own. And this does happen, the amount of schools who I've spoken to, in China, in Thailand, in Hong Kong, where they've discovered that a child has been living alone in a hotel, ordering delivery because the parents are overseas working or they're in a different province, and it's neglect. It's a neglect and emotional abuse, and it's incredibly damaging to the child. And it's really hard for often people to piece these things together to realize that this is child abuse and child neglect. And it's more challenging because it's so difficult to explain to these parents, when the parents may come back and say, well, the child's got everything. They've got the best, computer. They do all the clubs. We've got millions of tutors, and it's hard to explain to them that this actually is damaging their child. But there's also that, speaking of tutors, there's also affluent neglect, such as high pressure to achieve. We hear the term sometimes tiger mum, tiger parent, too high expectations, putting on, immense immense pressure to the child, where they feel that they can't cope, they have anxiety, it can lead to suicidal thoughts and even suicide. It does happen. So it's really important that, a school, works with parents to understand how this can be a concern. And then another element I want to talk about is safer recruitment. Again, this will vary from country to country, but, it's really important to have safer recruitment practices in place. And look, I've heard stories, that I know personally from working in schools, that I have been told by teachers and heads, about poor safeguarding practices, recruitment practices. And, the amount of times I have heard about a teacher being inappropriate in whatever way, and, the situation has just been sort of swept under the carpet, so to speak, and that teacher has been, moved on, they've been given a reference, and they're able to offend in a new country. And it happens frequently. And it's not just about, a teacher, being harmful to the children. It's also about teachers who are, not as qualified. You want to see that this person is a qualified teacher, that they understand professional conduct, because when you're employing somebody who maybe hasn't necessarily gone through rigorous teacher training, they're not aware of their professional conduct. They may have, come from working in a tutor center, and their behaviors, such as, hugging the children a lot and kissing and, being too friendly, they may think it's innocent, but of course it's inappropriate. And so it's really, making sure that you vet staff carefully. This is not just international teachers, this is all staff. And it's very, very important that, as leadership, that you are, doing background checks. And these are thorough background checks. These are, getting police checks, not just from, Indonesia as an example, but also if they're from the UK, then, that's the DBS service. I got the little logo on the page. The country where they've previously come from. So as an example, they may have come from Hong Kong, they've got a job in Jakarta or, Surabaya. I would like to see their their police check from Hong Kong as well. So it's being really rigorous in terms of your research, basically, in checks. And the other thing is references. I think it's very important that, very important that, you're really looking up these references and speaking to qualified individuals. It's not good enough to receive a reference from somebody's colleague or a random person. Their reference needs to come from a leadership or line manager position from their, previous job. And if they can't provide that, then it's a red flag, and then you need to be concerned. And obviously, talking about online safety, one of the easiest things you can do is Google somebody, because guaranteed, there will be an online paper trail of any potential red flags that they may have left, or it turns out that they were never previously at that school. And so I think it's all these issues are about being rigorous with your policies, procedures, and practices. And so, quickly touching on these concerns, I want to talk about whistleblowing, something that is very sensitive, as a teacher, because you don't really want to get your colleagues in trouble. However, it's something that you have a duty of care to these students to essentially report. So there are things called a low-level concern, and these the behaviors I was referring to when somebody kind of gets a bit too friendly with other students. It might be that there are low-level concerns, as I said. Maybe it's that they're just being a bit too pally, or maybe they're just shouting at them a little bit too much, or they friended them on Instagram. It's not a direct, immediate concern, but it is a red flag, and it's something that needs to be monitored and spoken to about that teacher. But obviously there are more serious concerns. So for example, if you discover there's an issue with a teacher and a student, it is your duty of care to report. Unfortunately, it's not good enough to say, well, they're my friend, I play paddle with them after school. It's your duty as an educator to report, but obviously be mindful that you're aware of how to report, because if you do fail to report, there are really serious repercussions. And if I, I've got a few articles here of, safeguarding, big safeguarding concerns that have happened in schools, most recently in Australia, where there's been systemic abuse in the early years education sector, where a worker who previously had a criminal background was allowed to work in these schools, and it's only being unraveled. There are so many cases of teachers who have seriously abused children, but also if I look at that article from the STMP that we have here, 30% of children feeling that they want to self-harm and they have suicidal thoughts because of the sheer pressure from parents. And so it's your duty to monitor, report, and just be aware of these concerns, because if you don't, then there could be a really serious outcome and situation on the other end. And obviously you don't want that on your hands, but also it's highly detrimental to the school and its reputation. And then one thing quickly I want to talk about is record keeping best practices. So okay, we have these concerns. What do we do about them? Well, we've got to make sure that there's confidentiality involved. So we've got to keep records secure, accessible. They need to be dated, timelines, signed. Everything must be factual and objective. Clear chronology, so making sure the timelines are, and these events are accurate, and then of course retaining them and disposing of them safely. So for example, if you don't use an online system like CPOMs or something similar, then how it's for you to think about how you manage these reports of incidences so that they are kept securely, so that it protects the child's data. And then we obviously we'll talk a little bit about the TPPK mandate and reporting later on, but this is actually something that's in our courses to guide you in terms of how to report. And this is quite a simple flow chart in terms of what do we do when we see a concern. So for example, is a child in immediate danger? Well, obviously we always report to the DSL. If you don't refer to them as DSL, then it's the equivalent of that. Maybe it's your child protection officer. It might be your manager if you don't work in a school. They will then handle that by, for example, contacting the police or ambulance or whatever agencies. And if it's not immediate, then of course always report to your DSL or manager. And then we talk about external support. So of course you have the TPPK, who the DSL will report to, who will then escalate it to external agencies. But if obviously they're not as serious, like a low-level concern that I mentioned, or something like affluent neglect, where it's really just a conversation that needs to be had with the parent, sorry, is you will manage it internally, and then the organisation will provide continual care. And that's really important because it can be tricky to involve police, external agencies. Some countries have very clear guidelines of reporting, the UK being one. But it's different in countries like China and Indonesia. It can become quite problematic and difficult to manage when you involve police in these situations. So that's why it's important to follow procedures and handle with care, but also manage internally. So I want to quickly talk about why whole school training is important, because we can talk about concerns, we can talk about reporting, but do we know enough about child safeguarding to actually be able to identify concerns properly and also, manage them appropriately? And I think a key phrase here that I like is safeguarding isn't optional, it's essential. This is not something that's a nice add-on to your professional portfolio in terms of CPD. This is mandatory. Everybody should receive safeguarding training. And I don't just mean teaching staff, I mean everybody within your school. And this is, janitors, security guards, bus drivers, maybe the nursery auntie, catering, admin, HR, board members, everybody in your school community needs to complete safeguarding training. And so to quickly talk about what we do as TeachUp in terms of training is, I guess, what the most important element when we created this training was the multilingual and regionally relevant aspect to it. So although we have these wonderful best practices in the likes of the UK and Australia, New Zealand, we're not living in Australia and UK and New Zealand. We're living in Indonesia. And so we need to complete training that, incorporates local context. And of course, being available in Bahasa Indonesia, because, we are, I'm sure the majority of your, minimum 50% staff are going to be Bahasa Indonesia speakers. And, I certainly wouldn't want to attempt to do training in Chinese, for example, if I was offered it, because that would be a bit of a disaster. And so, you want to be able to offer training in somebody's home language, because most importantly, it's to make sure that they understand the training. Otherwise, it makes it redundant. So that's what we have done. We have created training that is fully in Bahasa Indonesia, but also that it has regional context. So for example, you can see this is a screenshot from our course here. This is talking about the TPPK mandate in Indonesia. But we have case studies, and we have scenario-based assessments that, again, that Indonesia specific. And then quickly, you can see a little video as this goes. This is literally what the courses look like. Safeguarding is a bit of a tricky, dry subject. And so what we've done is try to make sure that the actual design itself is engaging, but also that it's going to leave you more knowledgeable and able to put all this training into practice. Because it's no good, you doing all this training and maybe clicking A, B, C, oh my goodness, I just want to finish it quickly so I can get my certificate and HR can, tick me off the list. Well, we need to really be confident that we know how to, manage safeguarding within our schools. So that's why we've tried to make this as engaging as possible, especially with our scenario-based assessments that, our learners really, really seem to enjoy. Talking about, certificates, we have, each course has a certificate that is CPD certified. It's CPD certified. Too much talking. CPD certified, that will obviously assist you in terms of compliance with HR. And this is downloadable at the end of every single course. So you can keep that digital certificate in your personal portfolio, and it can be sent to HR. So you can also then, keep it in your portfolio, but also that the school has this available. So for example, we have many schools who go through accreditation, maybe it's WASC or it's CIS, and they need to demonstrate this type of compliance to go through that accreditation. So this is how this is beneficial in terms of having your certificates, for inspectors and board members. And then again, for management, if you're on the management side, we have our, tracking. And so this allows your reporting manager in your school to monitor and manage who has completed training. So you can see on the screen here, we've got people with lovely green squares, which means they're very good and they've completed their training, and there's somebody there with an orange who hasn't finished it. And again, this allows your management to track, so that again we can be compliant and make sure that we have we're all up to date in terms of our training. So again, really helpful tool that we have incorporated as part of our training. And then we've got our TeachUp Safe School. So this is something that's new that we've implemented, and this is a certificate that can go in the foyer of your school, so that parents and visitors are aware that you are a TeachUp Safe School. Okay, that you have completed CPD certified, child protection training, which essentially demonstrates whole school commitment to child protection. And it's really important, I think, to showcase that so that parents feel safe and confident that their children are going to a school where all members of the school community have completed child safeguarding training. So it's really important to build, that culture, child safeguarding culture. So I'm going to hand over to James so I can have a drink of water and let him take over the screen to just talk a little bit more about the TPPK mandate and the work that we've done with the Indonesian government MOE to help incorporate the latest information into our training.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, for the comprehensive walkthrough there. So I've just actually put a quick poll, if you wouldn't mind answering for all the attendees. Does your school provide whole school safeguarding training? If you could kindly answer yes or no, just help us with our understanding of how many schools on the call today are already working with providers of safeguarding training. That would be useful to know. So I will just share my screen. So the TPPK mandate, I'll just put it in full 1 second. Where's that? Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Good, James.
Great, thanks. So TPPK, what is it? So this was a key development by the regulation of the Ministry of Education, Culture, Research and Technology. This was mandated in December 2023, and it requires all schools to have a child protection committee comprising of at least 3 members. One of those has to be a parent and another a faculty member and teacher. So this, my Bahasa Indonesia is not so good, Permendikbudristek number 46, 2023, expresses multiple forms of violence, including sexual violence, bullying, which covers physical, verbal, and online, discrimination on the basis of gender, disability, religion, ethnicity, etc., and intolerance and psychological violence. So, as I mentioned, it's a committee comprising of at least 3 staff and parent members, and it's to help identify and reduce risks of violence in the school environment, to receive and respond to reports of incidents, to ensure the the recovery and protection of victims, to promote awareness and prevention measures among staff and students, and at a broader level for provincial and district levels, they're required to form a task force, SATGAS, to coordinate responses and support schools in carrying out safeguarding obligations. So in addition to school-based structures, the Ministry of Women's Empowerment and Child Protection, the PPA organization, has reinforced public reporting channels. So cases of violence against women and children can be reported through the Sahabat Perempuan dan Anak SAPA 129 call center, which connects victims or witnesses to support and intervention services. So for schools in Indonesia, what does this mean? It means that, because of this mandate, safeguarding is not optional, but it's also a legal responsibility. Now, DEPI and TeachUp did a pilot project with 12 schools in November and December 2024. So we trained 659 staff across 3 provinces and 12 different schools. And this was in response to the TPPK mandate. So the mandate requires all schools to form a child protection task force, but there is no actual national level training program that's available for staff in schools. I've spoken with maybe 60 or 70 government, SPK and Yayasan schools over the past year, and typically particularly for Yayasan and for government schools, only 1 or 2 staff members will go away to receive training off-site. And their responsibility is to come back into the school environment and then to distribute that training. Now, having spoken to many, many schools, what happens quite often is that the training may happen and it's a quick 1 hour, but the retention for that learning is very, very low. And quite often, actually, that training, when those staff members come back to the school, doesn't happen. Interestingly, I've spoken to a lot of SPK schools. Some of the more established SPK schools will, of course, have safeguarding policies in place, but it was surprising, actually, that there are a lot of SPK schools that do not have comprehensive safeguarding policies. And certainly not that, no training which offers bilingual, where both faculty staff and non-faculty staff can have whole school safeguarding training. So in response to this, DEPI partnered with TeachUp, and TeachUp, as Stephanie's mentioned, provides CPD-certified bilingual asynchronous online training. So it's self-paced learning. We support TeachUp with the localization, so we work very closely with TeachUp to support the adapting the international best practice courses to better align to local regulations and customs. And through our several conversations with the Ministry of Education at the national level and provincial level, we've consulted with them about how we can further better align the courses to the Indonesian education environment. So just a bit of a context to the pilot project. So we had 12 schools, including 6 SPK schools, 3 Yayasan schools from the Muhammadiyah Foundation and Talakanita Foundation, as well as government schools from the Salatiga City Office. So we trained 659 school staff. So 312 completed the level 1, so the non-faculty Safeguarding and Child Protection Indonesia course, and 347 completed the advanced, the level 2 Safeguarding and Child Protection course. So the results and the feedback from staff was extremely positive. 94% of level 1, so these are the non-faculty staff, these are the bus drivers, the office boys, etc., said that they improved recognition of safeguarding risks. 93% of level 2 participants, so these are the faculty staff, the teachers, the leaders, felt more confident identifying concerns. 92% of teachers and school leaders felt better equipped to report cases, and 95% of level 1 participants expressed confidence taking safeguarding action. So really, really positive outcomes from the pilot project. Where are we now? So having launched that pilot project, we've been invited by the Ministry of Education at the national and provincial level. You can see here on the bottom right picture, that's us with Rosprita Rusdiana, who is the head of Puspeka, which is the Center for Character Strengthening. And we've coordinated with her team to further refine and improve the Indonesia Safeguarding Course Suite. And we are having ongoing discussions with the Central Java Ministry of Education to support training for supervisors throughout the Central Java province, as well as we are now engaging with the Semarang City Office to provide a select number of courses to the 1,300 schools across that city district as well. So really good momentum, and TeachUp is gaining a lot of visibility, I think, in Indonesia now because of its specific relevance to the TPPK mandate and supporting the practical implementation of that mandate, and the growing recognition that safeguarding is not just a nice to have, it's now mandatory, and all schools need to be providing whole school training to support and create safer learning environments. So I'd like to open up the floor now to any questions, if there are any from any of the attendees. I think we have around 12 or 13 attendees today, so please feel free to show your video, and you're welcome to speak directly into the group, or if you are more confident to just type the question in the chat, you can also do that as well.
We can see if anybody's going to be brave, James.
Someone always has to go first.
I think one thing that maybe I can ask a question to the participants, James, is what real sort of safeguarding concerns have you seen as educators in your school? Because as much as we speak to teachers everywhere around, well, not just Asia, around the world, for us, it's so valuable to listen to the concerns that educators face in their schools, because, you'd be surprised about issues that you may not think would be a concern in this region, or that maybe something new that, we hadn't really thought about. So if anybody's brave enough to sort of share their main concerns in their school with their students or parents, then that would be really valuable, I think.
Is anybody brave enough to go first?
Somebody's asking, what does CPD stand for? That's continuous professional development. So typically, it's not just a UK thing. It's something that we call professional learning or professional development. CPD is your professional learning that you will do throughout the academic year. So I'm sure you will do it maybe at the beginning of the year. You might have a specific day set aside, but it's professional development. So it's not just safeguarding. It might be teaching and learning, such as behavior management, adaptive teaching, special educational needs. So that's what CPD stands for. And in terms of the CPD certification service that you may have seen, that's an organization, a body that provides certification for professional learning companies. And so it's sort of seen as the kind of gold standard for certification, a stamp, I suppose, for training. So that's who we use. And actually most global providers will use the CPD certification service, and you get credits, so CPD points for every course that you complete. So that's why you have that CPD logo on the certificates.
Thanks, Stephanie. And Inos, there's a question.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
But I can't open my camera. I don't know why. It's a low access camera. Try again and etc. But okay. I will go. First of all, my question is regarding to your certificate. I mean, you said that about the certificate. Do they need to update the certificate every year or every 2 years or etc.? So after they, for example, the schools or the teachers have received the certificate from this training, and then you say X for in these years, and then do they need like update the certificates the next 2 years or what?
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
the second one is my question. In Indonesia, a Ministry of Women Empowering and Child Protection, they have child-friendly schools. Yeah. Okay. So how this initiative connect with the child-friendly schools? That initiative by the Ministry of Women Empowerment. In Indonesia also, we have like safe school programs. Safe school means not only they talk about the child protection in schools, but they also talk about the climate hazard. They talk about the disaster hazard. So that's the initiative about the safe school in Indonesia. So it's like they are comprehensive one, like comprehensive school safety program in Indonesia. It include all the safeguarding one, and then safe from the daily hazard, and then climate hazard, and then disaster hazard. So what do you think about that? Thank you.
Do you want me to tackle that, Stephanie?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so the child-friendly initiative, from my understanding, is essentially a nationwide exercise to see who can come up with a comprehensive, training approach to better safeguard students. So there's no standardized training which is available across schools throughout Indonesia. But I think the value of what TeachUp provides in its whole school training is that it ensures that each individual staff learner has had training, and each individual staff member has that certification. It's self-paced learning for an individual, and they will go through the courses as an individual, and that individual will get certification. It's not, broad training where you'll get 20, 30 people in a room where someone might be looking out the window. The instructional design of TeachUp is very, very engaging, and it ensures that learners cannot, click and skip through exercises. So it ensures that comprehension of learning so that learners are engaged. So the Child-Friendly Schools initiative is, this type of training will certainly support that at a kind of, if you're in a government school environment. But, Yayasan schools and SPK schools, from my understanding, are not necessarily part of that Child-Friendly Schools initiative. My understanding was that was more of a government thing. Or correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's not wrong. Then I actually it's an discussion, but I thought that this activity is really strengthen the child-friendly schools program that we have already done so far. I thought that. Then.
Yeah, no, there are lots of good initiatives out there throughout Indonesia, but what the main challenge is there's no standardized approach. And what TeachUp training provides is a standardized approach for all staff. So it's ensuring that all staff have a minimum standard of understanding of child protection and their roles and responsibility in the school. Whereas the child-friendly initiatives, initiatives plural, there are so many different variations of different types of training, but there's no kind of one standardized approach. In Indonesia, for example, TeachUp, since launching the Indonesia course suite about 5 or 6 months ago, is now working with around 25 schools. So, Global Jaya School, Sekolah Ciputra, Jakarta Intercultural School, BPK Parabol schools, Sekolah Victory Plus, just to name a few off the top of my head. So there are lots and lots of schools recognizing that this training is very valuable in giving a baseline training for all staff, with specific, role-specific training for bus drivers and canteen workers, but also for, HR, so safer recruitment for safeguarding, safeguarding for sports and recreation, so specific safeguarding training for sports teachers, coaches, volunteers. So the training is specific to roles within the school, and the CPD certification means that all of the courses have gone through a very rigorous quality assurance process to ensure they are of the highest standard. And that's why the courses are CPD certified.
And I think one final thing to touch on, James, on this is, I can see that Surabaya had like UNICEF related child safe friendly city, is that, I know UNICEF has their child protection mission, but I bring you back to the difference between child safeguarding and child protection. They're not the same thing. So it's very important that we, really care about child protection and things like external agencies and how the government responds and our approach and attitude, but actually it's the safeguarding training we're talking about here in terms of those policies, those procedures, how we conduct ourselves professionally in school. It's nothing to do with child protection reporting. That's a different thing. And so I think this is where we bring in this extra expertise, is that it's important to be a child safe city and acknowledge the importance of child protection. It's relating to child safeguarding.
Yeah. I agree with you. Actually, I agree with you. So what I thought that this is like strengthens that what exactly the basics that they have already done, right? So okay, the difference with the child protection and safeguarding is different. Okay, it's yes, but what you are trying is like a complement to strengthen the capacity of schools, the teachers, how to safeguard like that, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. And then
Yeah.
to ask your questions, James, like we have already a safeguarding training for teachers in Yogyakarta and Bali, and also child protection activity for all the schools members through our Safe School project in Yogyakarta and Bali.
Fantastic. I would love to read a bit more about that. Eros, would you be able to share more information with me over email?
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly. I will.
I think
So,
the one thing on that is
because
yeah,
sorry,
go ahead.
I would
No,
like
go ahead.
to ask. If you talk about the safe schools, so that in Indonesia mind in our like implementation area, we talk about the safe school, not only the safeguarding or child protection, etc. We also talk about the how they save from the another hazard like disaster hazard, climate hazard, and etc. and etc. That's called the comprehensive school safety program that we have already implemented with the Ministry of Education. Prof. Nunuk, that you say in your presentations, Director General of Teachers and Educators has already know about the mitigation and also the preparedness, not only safer from the disaster and also climate hazard, but also the conflict and protection hazard. That's a point, James.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing, Enos.
Yep.
Are there any other questions regarding TeachUp?
So,
No.
so James, how would the participants today get in touch to ask, more questions? Perhaps they'd like to experience a free trial of the courses so they can see for themselves. How would they get in touch with TeachUp and DEPI?
Yeah, good question. So I've just put a poll to receive a 5-day free trial. So if you'd like to explore the TeachUp training portal and review the courses that are part of the TeachUp Indonesia course suite, then please reply to the poll. If your answer is yes, we can track who said yes, and we can set you up with a free demo account to do some of the courses. Also, I will follow up with this from this webinar with the recording and also the slides from today's presentation. So if you have any questions regarding TeachUp, please feel free to contact me, and I'll just put my email in the chat. So it's james.thomas@depi.co.id. Okay, well, if I have no more questions, thank you so much, Stephanie, for your time today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And thank you very much for all the attendees today. I think we had around 11 or 12 from quite a range of schools. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for joining.
All right, thank you so much, James.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.